working on a book that's basically about American and Southern nationalism. And
Mm-hmm.
Texas nationalism is a thing.
It's a thing.
It's absolutely a thing. And
And if you go anywhere in the world
yeah,
and you show people a outline of the state of Texas,
I know what it is.
they know what it is, right?
Mhm.
You can't do that with
No.
almost any other state.
Well, that's what I told somebody when I first moved down there. I said, I don't have to explain where I'm from anymore.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
pretty damn simple.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
So-
Sam Houston said, you may all go to hell and I will go to
That was
Texas.
David Crockett.
David Crockett?
Yeah.
I thought it was Sam Houston.
No, it was David Crockett. When he
Even
lost
better.
re-election to Congress, he stepped out on the courthouse steps in Madison, Texas, right as he was about to leave, and Madison, Tennessee, and said, "You all may go to hell. I shall go to Texas."
Nice. Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. Friends, welcome back. We've been off for a few weeks while I traveled the globe to Miami, Florida, and we had a Thanksgiving holiday, but really excited to be back here in the studio with our dear friend, Dr. Keith Gaddie. Hi, Keith.
Hey, Andy, how are you today?
Good. Keith, you were also in Miami with me.
Yes, I was. There were many of us in Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Maybe to start. And then we're also going to talk about the events of this week where the Oklahoma Democrats apparently inadvertently kicked independents out of the primaries. And then we'll talk about the state of Texas some,
Yeah.
and then wherever else the spirit moves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I tell you, it was good to be. I was. We were talking before we got on air. I went over to the pool and caught a swim this morning. It was like 42 degrees outside, and I'm still bone chilled from the start of the day. And it just struck me last week we're doing business in Miami, but there was a wonderful pool there that was still lappable. 84 degrees outside, warm
Yeah.
saltwater pool. You can't beat it.
Yeah.
I always like going back there because when I was in college, I was a legislative intern for a state representative from down around Kendall, which is down in that part of Dade County, and so it's always good to get back down there.
Yeah.
It reminds you that there are many versions of America, and Miami is absolutely one of them.
Yeah.
And it would behoove a lot of us to go there and visit it.
It was better than I expected.
Oh yeah.
Quick timeout. Hey, Lena. Come here. Let me see that. It's got a long cable on it. Okay. I realized the other day
Yeah.
that I wasn't recording the right audio, but I think we should be good. Okay. We'll make sure. And you said it is recording, right? Okay. Yeah, Miami was unexpectedly good. I've never been to Florida before, and I'm
really?
admittedly biased against the state for Florida man reasons, right? Like just every state has
Yeah.
their buffoonery, and Florida seems to attract a lot of it, at least in the media.
Yeah.
But Miami was cool. It was exactly the Miami vibe that I expected.
Yeah. I mean, the city's only about 500,000 people, but there are 7 million people living in the metro.
Oh wow,
And
the traffic supports that. Let me tell you.
Well, and what's cool is when you go to South Florida, one thing they have that's very handy is they've got really good commuter rail.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went down, I flew into Fort Lauderdale. I grabbed the tri-rail down to Dadeland, where the
Mm-hmm.
hotel was, and then coming back out, I was flying back out of Miami International and took the train right up there. But having driven in Miami and dealt with both the Turnpike and the Poor People's Highway, as they call I-95, it's just a 70-mile long corridor of dense population, and the city of Miami itself has one of the tallest skylines in the United States. It has like 75 buildings that are over 50 stories high.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I went into Miami on Friday night after the conference
Yeah.
was over, and we'll talk about the conference in just a minute. But I went up there. It was Art Basel. It's Miami Art
Yes.
Week. And I was like, I'm going to take one night to do something for myself. And the problem, so was all of Miami. So we took the train for about 45 minutes, then got off, took a bus that was supposed to be 30 minutes, and an hour later we were still sweating it out. We got out and walked 30 minutes, and I was like, I didn't expect a 6-mile transit to take 2.5 hours, but it was it delivered everything I hoped it would be once we got there. So.
Yeah. Well, next time just put on your running shoes and your shorts and jog up there. You'll get there faster.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that's funny. I was wearing a Lyle Lovett t-shirt
Yeah.
and just some shorts and some Birkenstocks, and I was sorely underdressed for the art scene in Miami. We went to I thought we were going to get some fish tacos,
Yeah.
and go to a Haitian fish fry. We ended up going to the hotel that supposedly had fish tacos was very swanky. There was like multiple Lamborghinis parked outside when we got there at like 7 p.m. Apparently Kesha and Haim and other like musicians were at a party inside. I was just the schmuck in the lobby. I put my sunglasses on to look like I was cool.
Well, remember, if you look like you belong there, you belong there. And the way to look like you're belonging there is to just assume that and walk in, right? Well, there was an old line from the movie The Paper that a clipboard and a confident wave will get you in anywhere. I still believe that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, several people ask if I was an artist, and I was like, I guess I look schmucky enough for people to think that I'm an artist.
Oh, yeah.
Tattoos being shown and the whole thing. So, but everyone was really delightful. I had some great ceviche downtown, saw some cool art, and really left with good memories.
Yeah, we had some good Argentinian food on Thursday night. I can't remember the name of the place, but it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And we had a 4 ceviche sampler that also had some crab on it. And then the entrees were fantastic.
Yeah.
And I was out there. I'm digging for the names of everybody with me, but some really great, relatively young national leaders in this area of electoral reform and political reform. I mean, Andy, it was just a delightful group to get together with, and I'm looking forward to working with and engaging these people.
Oh, well, thanks.
I mean, well, they come from all across the political spectrum, but they believe in one thing: democracy. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool that you've got a place where everybody can come together, kind of set the partisan goals aside, and just talk about how to do something fair.
Yeah.
Which means everybody operates under the same rules.
Yeah.
And under the same expectations to respect the rules. I really like that.
So listeners who might not remember from a few episodes ago, or more than that even, but in addition to running Let's Fix This, I'm the director of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, or NANNER, as we call it.
Yes.
And it's essentially a national network of organizations that are working on a myriad of policies related to what we call electoral reform. So it's things like open primaries, alternative voting methods like ranked choice voting or approval voting or consensus voting, getting money out of politics, expanding vote by mail, national popular vote, like trying to end or circumvent the electoral college, trying to end gerrymandering, those kinds of structural issues with our democracy, a lot of which listeners know are things that Let's Fix This cares about. That's actually how I got into that job, is that Let's Fix This had a policy agenda, I think in 2018 or 2019, that as we had been doing kind of a root cause analysis, we realized, hey, the reason we have these, dysfunction even at our state level is all of these structural things that limit the number of voters who participate. It limits who runs for office. Mm-hmm. It has a enormous bias towards incumbents, whether they've earned it or not. And it just is a system that has kind of been manipulated by the two major parties for their own perpetuity of power. And we thought we should change that. As it turns out, there's kind of a network of people across the country who came to those same conclusions, and really, in about 2017, they started working together. I joined NANNER in 2021, and we don't, as an organization, don't have an agenda itself, or we're not a coalition. We really are a network, and our summit brings together, as you said, leaders of these organizations or these kind of movements, as well as a much broader, healthy democracy ecosystem. So you get, people who are doing bipartisan teamwork among state legislators, like Future Caucus is an organization that works with legislators across the country to bring, and it's legislators under the age of, I think, 45, so millennial and Gen Z. Yeah. But you've, a whole bunch of other groups, funders. It's kind of a cool space.
Yeah, and, it's kind of funny. I had a call from a friend who is a professional pollster and opinion researcher. I won't say who, but a mutual friend that we have. And asking if I was going to be in the Metroplex at the time that we were going to be in Miami. And I said, no, I'm headed down to this. I said, why are you going to be in Dallas? And he said, well, I've got to go to ALEC.
Oh, right.
American Legislative Exchange Council.
Yeah. And there's folks from NANNER that were going to go to ALEC as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of funny because ALEC sometimes has, ALEC is essentially legislation in a box, for lack of a better way to put it. Mm-hmm. They've got set policy priorities and relatively canned legislation that for a couple of decades now they've been promoting and perpetuating by getting incumbent lawmakers engaged with them and then attempting to promote this, this one-size-fits-all legislation to become law in different states. And it just struck me as interesting because ALEC is essentially a conservative organization and has been associated with a variety of conservative initiatives that don't broaden participation. So I found it a little funny that I was headed off to
Right.
a very different event,
Yeah.
but one that's definitely ideologically diverse.
Yeah.
And I mean, Andy, I'll just tell you, it was absolutely worth the trip. I met great people to the extent I'm trying to remember names and everything else. But I've got a list of notes and emails I have to spend. You know how in your email you can pin something in Outlook?
Yeah.
So you can deal with it later. Yeah, I've got 26 emails pinned that I've got to go deal with today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that people don't think I'm blowing them off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Fortunately, you've got the holidays. You can kind of use as a little bit of a cover for that of like, it's been so hectic.
It's been finals week also. I have grading, okay?
Oh, right.
That's more important. I've still got some papers to grade. This is Friday afternoon. They'll be done by the end of the day.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Good. What stood out to you the most? Was it a person or a topic or?
There are a series of things I learned just observing kind of at a meta level. First of all, these are very bright people. And they've got not just good intentions, but good ideas. And if you look back historically, and this is the thing I just happen to be aware of from the academic side of things, if you look at different types of voting reform, advocates for one type of voting reform, that anything's better than the status quo, will fall into arguing over different arcane solutions that exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to watch how conversations jump past that and seeing people engaged who have different approaches to electoral reform, but they're all engaged ultimately on the same goal, which is to get past the post-elections, get past a narrowing of the electorate, and the willingness to try some reform as you find your way to the best reform for your community or your state.
Mm-hmm.
That's very refreshing. That's very refreshing. So that's probably the first thing that jumps out at me. The second thing is how you've got significant leadership in these organizations that often appears to be impossibly young, which is very heartening, actually, okay, because there are a few folks there that have been doing this for a long time, 4 or 5 decades, and they are these sustainable spirits of any movement because they know the lore, they know the history, they know things that have been tried that didn't work at one point, and there are lessons you can take for them, and sometimes they've been doing this longer than most of the people in the room have been alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's tremendous value in that and having these people all interacting. The second thing is you get people that come who didn't come from politics and didn't come from policy, but then they got interested and they got engaged. And they bring interesting ideas to the table. And, part of the goal there and the challenge there is, I think I don't know if I observed this to you or somebody else, that in evangelicalism, it's always fascinating when somebody finds Jesus, because the next thing they want is they want everybody to find Jesus, right? And they haven't thought through how they've found Jesus or whether or not they've found the best version of Jesus for themselves. And so getting them to get past that initial experience to engage all the ways you can think about reform is a challenge, but it happens. It happens. There's tremendous value in that.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy too.
Yeah, it's. I did that as constructively as I could, but the so that's sort of a second thing. But the youth and energy and sophistication, and by sophistication I don't mean pretense or haughtiness, but merely the ability to think deeply but clearly about problems is very impressive among the various people that are leading these organizations, leading these efforts in the states or nationally. And it's very heartening to see. And it sets up, it makes you realize, it helps you understand part of what we consistently see in polling data, which is this huge disjuncture between people under 40 and the current state of public policy and national political agenda, particularly in areas like voting rights. Okay, that there's just this stark break that exists with people that were born after about 1975 or so, or 1980. and what's come before them,
Mm-hmm.
especially my generation, which is a fairly conservative one. And it makes you realize that they're in this game for the long run,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it is sustainable, but that also means that you're gonna have to have some wins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to have some wins.
Well, so you're an older Gen Xer, right?
Oh, I'm at the leading edge of it. Yeah.
And I'm a elder millennial. I was born in '81,
Yeah.
and it is interesting now to see, when you. So I'm 44, so the generations are roughly 20 years, right? So
Right.
we've got Gen Z coming in now they're in their 20s, and even like younger millennials who were in their late 20s or early 30s. I feel old talking to them a lot, and it's interesting to see, like, especially in this political environment, economic environment, the factors that shaped each of our generations. And I mean, there's
Yeah.
memes about this every day, right? Of like living through, for me, like through 9/11 and the housing crisis in
Yeah.
08, 09, through all of the war on terror, war on drugs as a kid, like all these things that kind of shaped our life. And now in this Trump era, it has really changed, I think, my generation's approach to things. And it's interesting to see the newer folks coming into the movement that see democracy in many similar ways, but also like a very different flavor than even what I've experienced. And I'm sure you have the same thing 20 years in advance.
Oh yeah, and of course, I mean, I'm old enough to remember Vietnam body counts on the news and things
Oh,
like
gosh,
that, and the
right.
POW crisis, and I've been through, I think, 5 or 6 recessions as an adult, right? So, to me, everything's always the roller coaster, and it's
Right.
okay. But I also come from the leading edge of the last generation of feral children, right?
Right.
Where we were just told, go outside, find something to do.
Yeah.
And we were pretty much the last group that really had that privilege.
Yeah.
But I think also that makes us very solution oriented, right? But I got thinking about all this this morning. I was sitting at the Subaru dealership waiting for the car to get attended to, right? And I got thinking about how why people like stability and what culture does. And I got thinking first about it in terms of language, right? A stable culture gives you predictability. And it also gives you ease because you can go about your business without a lot of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
You can read, you can see, what the norms are and the rules are that govern the public space. There are social norms that you follow, and those were a good bit more. Those were more rigid and less pliant when I was growing up, right? And there are parts of America where they still have more rigid, less pliant norms, okay? And the problem is we have an increasing number of Americans that have either grown up with different norms or evolved norms that are more flexible. And we brought our kids up in a much more flexible environment than we were raised.
Mm-hmm.
And that is troubling to people that come out of the old established order because the world's not as easy as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we give them a variety of easy ways to get mad about it and throw fits and make fun of everybody else. Tell me to get them at your pronouns, things
Right,
like that,
right.
right? Because most of the time, it's pretty predictable, right? There are pretty good easy visual cues and social cues that can guide our interactions. And the older people get, the more difficult it is to be flexible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the demand for a traditional culture and a Cepheid-toned memory of a long ago time becomes attractive because the reality of what's normal for everybody who's coming up and will be the majority very soon is difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And that's where I'm fortunate to be a university professor. I'm always around bright people in their 20s.
Right.
To me, the world is always 21 years old.
Sure.
Right? And I was 22 when I started teaching college. I mean, it's just, Yeah, I've watched this exponential gap grow between me and my students, where it used to be 1 year apart, and then it was 3, and then 5, and now it's 40 or more. Um, but I'm fortunate that students help me along the way,
Right.
And they are largely gracious when I'm playing catch up. But I think with this group, what I found refreshing was every event we went to, every engagement, every dialogue was constructive engagement with opportunities and challenge. And it didn't get caught up in, for lack of a better way to put it, a lot of the cultural pose and posture that accompanied things like the Occupy Wall Street movement, where they developed their own language with signs and signals in meetings to indicate what's going on,
Right.
instead of just having people raise their hand.
Right.
So that's what I really liked about this is there's a clear focus on what the real goals are. And the real goals are about creating a highly representative, responsive, free democracy. It's not about trying to assert the primacy of the Democratic Party. It's about having a free, functioning, responsive, responsible democracy and having mechanisms to attach public sentiment to institutions. I like that.
Well, it's so interesting because in the reform movement, there's almost a rejection of, or a heavy resistance and probably a rejection of those like partisan forces, right? That either party in different times or different locations are trying to assert their dominance over an issue. And we spend a lot of time trying to think about what is good for voters, right? Party aside, but like, what do voters really want? And I mean, I think in America, a growing number of voters don't necessarily want a party label attached to them, right? They may or may not vote with one party or the other at different times, but we see independent voters rising across the country, including here in Oklahoma, which is probably a good segue to talk about what happened this week. And I say this as an independent voter in Oklahoma. I think our listeners probably know I was, growing up from 18, I was a Republican because that's what my family was, and I didn't think much about it. And I was a Republican for about 10 years, and then Hope and Change came along in 2008, and really liked what Barack Obama had to say and his kind of ethos, and switched to the Democratic Party because I felt like I wanted to align with him, and also so I could vote in the primary in that year, and then did that for about 10 years, and then as I got more into politics, honestly, and electoral issues and reform and trying to build a better democracy, I got a little, I don't know if I got frustrated, but I just felt like party affiliation was not for me because there was an expectation there that I should align with one party or the other. And I was like, listen, I'm my own man. Like I want to make my own decisions, and I like candidates on both sides. I may vote for them for their own, for different reasons. Of course, Oklahoma is a state that historically has, by default, closed primaries, meaning that you can only vote in the party primary for the party that you're affiliated with. And if you're an independent, you were kind of out of luck unless a party would allow independents to vote in their primaries. And I think since 2016, for the last 10 years, basically, the Democratic Party has allowed independents to vote in their primaries. But we found out this week, as I'm sure our listeners have seen on the news, that ends for 2026 and 2027. It's a 2-year thing. And it seems like, from the reporting and the conversation I've had, that there were some leadership changes within the Oklahoma Democratic Party, and somebody forgot to file the notice within the month. And they may or may not have sent something a few months earlier, but the election board was like, hey, the law is clear. You got to send it in the month of November. We didn't receive it. Thus, your primaries are going to be closed to independents. And it sparked a lot of concern within the Democratic Party that I've heard, and certainly among independents, where now roughly 487,000 Oklahomans don't get to vote in any primary or primary runoff next year, which is a big deal.
Although I think they can still vote in the Libertarian primary.
There's never a Libertarian primary, and
there have been Libertarian primaries. So I voted in them as an independent.
The Libertarian Party did not file their paperwork either, so no party is open to it.
That's awesome. So both Libertarians are going to pick the nominees this year.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my life, I've been a registered voter in Kentucky, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and now Texas. Okay, and it's fascinating to me because I mean, the simple thing to say is, yeah, remember to renew your car tag because that's what happened here.
Right.
There should have just been a post-it sitting on somebody's desk. Remember to renew the open primary paperwork with the State Board of Elections. Here's the deadline. Why don't we go ahead and take care of that now while we're writing the post-it? And it got missed. And only the people at the State Democratic Party can explain why. And what will happen is this will be turned into a joke of people who want to talk about how this is evidence of what Will Rogers said. I'm a member of no organized political party. I'm a Democrat. That, this is why you don't want the Democrats running anything. Hell, they can't remember to even renew their paperwork.
Right.
But that's not fair, okay?
Right. And
These
to be
things
clear,
happen.
the Democratic Party in their convention back in the summer overwhelmingly supported, yes, let's keep open primaries. And what they've said is that they sent notice to the election board back in August. We don't know. We haven't seen the proof of that, but they said that they did. And the election board was like, that's fine, but you've got to tell us in the month of November because that's what the law says, and you didn't do it then. Well, if it goes to court, we'll find out what happens. But your point is well taken that it perpetuates this like media narrative of like Dems in disarray, which is often wrong and certainly unfortunate, but it hits home a little different today.
Well, yeah, and this goes to a thing about election law in general, which is that you'll have, in election law, you will have explicit, detailed instructions and requirements, right? And those are there in part to give the people enforcing the law latitude, right? And latitude to kind of lay aside those things a little bit, or latitude to enforce it hard. And one reason we have things like voter registration and party registration and deadlines, and why we had poll taxes and literacy tests, was it allowed the people that were in power, in the majority party, to keep the electorate small. Because a smaller electorate's easier to control. A homogeneous electorate's easier to control. And a lot of things that we work with in trying to improve elections around the country are a direct consequence of the late 19th century effort to make it complicated and difficult to vote so that you could have a small, manageable party electorate, especially in the South. So part of this is a legacy, that we're going to hold you to specific and complex rules. Rules say, notify us in November.
Right.
Well, but I let you know by November.
Right.
That doesn't matter.
Right.
Let us know in November.
Right.
So at this point, we are not parsing words, but we're very close to it. We're taking apart sentences and looking at very specific words. And this is the message to all of my students out there. Specificity in words matter when it comes to the law. Okay? It matters in contracts. Specific words matter because they frame your intent, they frame your obligations. And that's why you pay attention to the words.
Right. Even, a good example, right, is the difference between the word will and shall in the law, which most people don't appreciate, but will means maybe and shall means it will. Yes. And I don't, for now I'm thinking about it, I don't know for this section what it says in the statute, but I'm going to go back and look.
We'll put a footnote in at the end of the broadcast.
That's right.
So everybody know, right?
Well, and the impact. Let's talk about the impact of this.
Yeah.
As it's easy to say independents won't get to vote, and that is an impact on independent voters. But it's going to change the incentives for Democratic candidates who are running for office, especially if they have a primary.
Their electorate just got a lot older. A lot older and a lot smaller in the primary. And that means they have to change, they're going to have to change their targeting for voters. There's going to have to be a lot of voter education because there are going to be independents who are used to voting in that primary, and they'll show up. And they're going to be told, no, sorry, weren't you watching the news back after Thanksgiving, right? So, I mean, it's harder and harder to disseminate political information to the broad mass. Because the broad basis on which we disseminate information isn't available anymore. People don't watch local news. Local newspapers are fading, and even if they're online, they're not as readily engaged. So even though there's tons of information out there in general, specific information of this sort, which, among other things, what we call state organs, right, the official outlet for state news, isn't available to most of the public, right? They just don't get to it.
Right.
And so we're going to have a lot of people showing up, ready to vote in that primary, and they're not going to be able to.
No, and it's tough. Like everyone in my circles are talking about it this week. In fact, my state representative is who sent me the press release in the first place saying, "Holy cow, do you know about this?" But my circle is not representative of the general public.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. And it's a reminder to me that we, like Let's Fix This, will need to be doing a lot of voter education in 2026 to independents to say, hey, here's what happened. You don't get to vote in the primaries this year, but this is why you need to pay attention and stay engaged. You can still be just as vocal about the candidates you support or oppose, but you need to be ready to vote in November because independents now have an enormous amount of influence when it comes to the November election.
Yeah.
If they turn out, I mean, independents, there's about 487,000 registered independents.
Yeah.
There's only about 600,000 Democrats, and obviously there's about twice that in Republicans. But for a lot of these races, especially in competitive districts, the independents now have even more influence than they might have had in prior years.
Now, what's funny, though, is, if somebody's listening to this or any outlet that talks about this, you've got until 28 days before the primary to register under a party label.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really decide you want to vote in the Democratic primary, as long as you do it at least 28 days before the primary election, that's federal law. Okay?
I think it's longer in Oklahoma. You can't change your party affiliation in Oklahoma. I think it's from April 1st until November or until after August because it's before candidate filing, which is the first week in April this year.
Okay,
and so,
yes. But the thing is, if you're not registered, you've got until 28 days before the election.
Yes, to register.
And part of the reason why you've got that other paperwork limitation is there's always a concern of somebody voting in one party primary and then switching parties.
Right.
And, it's funny. I was a registered Democrat as a kid in Kentucky, okay? It was a blue state at the time, closed party elections, right? Registered Democrat. Voted in the Democratic presidential primary, moved to Florida, registered to vote down there. Registered as a Democrat again. Then it came to Georgia, and Georgia did not have party registration. You simply declared at the polls.
Mm-hmm.
So every primary was an open primary, effectively. You simply declared at the polls. The only limit was that if you voted in a party's initial primary, you could not vote in the other party's runoff. So
right, you had to stick with
flip.
it.
You had
Mm-hmm.
to stick with it and stick through. What was cool about that, though, is as political scientists, we could see just how much movement there was back and forth from election to election, how voters moved around and picked where they wanted to be voting.
Mm-hmm.
And they would usually run to the more competitive primaries statewide in order to have an influence on those nominees, because on the other side it was already determined.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to Louisiana, which had the jungle primary.
Mm-hmm.
But you had party registration because the presidential primary was closed.
Right.
And everything else was a free-for-all,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then I come to Oklahoma, and I'm back in a closed party primary state. And when I left Louisiana, I was a registered Republican in Louisiana because in New Orleans the reformers were Republicans. That's the thing, the good government groups, the anti-corruption people were all GOP. The only exception was that whole David Duke crowd. That's neither here nor there. But, so I remember I voted in the Republican Party caucus in 1996. And in that caucus, there were only two candidates in the caucus, Pat Buchanan and Phil Gramm. So I voted for Phil Gramm because he's a Georgia Bulldog. He became a U.S. Senator from Texas, right? But, then, I get up here and I was like, I'm really tired of this party stuff. And I was thinking seriously about my profession. And I thought, journalists will often either not register with a party or simply not vote.
Mm-hmm.
I can't not vote. But I decided to exit the party primary system and just be an independent. And I still am, and now I'm a registered voter in Texas, where you declare at the polls. So
I'll come full circle for you.
Come full circle in a way, yeah. So it's...
Well, and it's ironic to me, right, that we are in the midst of collecting signatures for an open primaries state question. And we've been saying, listen, closed primaries are not a partisan issue, right? This is
right.
Both parties, in many cases, are seeking to maintain their own power. The fact that the Democrats have allowed independents to vote in the primaries here for the last 10 years is great, but also a bit of an outlier from state history. And it still means that there are a lot of races on the Republican side during primaries that are effectively the general, right? Like I think
Yeah.
the state treasurer's race last time was decided in a primary.
Yeah.
Means that no Democrats or independents or libertarians got to vote in that. And I think there's some pretty obvious problems with that. And so when I saw the news, my first thought was, I cannot believe, like, the ostensibly the gift this is to a campaign
Yeah.
for all political parties to say, independents, you don't get to vote.
Yeah.
You pay taxes, you pay for these elections, but we don't want you to have a say in that. And so I hope that if there's any other independents who are listening, if you haven't yet signed the petition for State Question 836, please do, because this definitely matters. And if you are a partisan right now, that's fine too. Everyone's, you're free to associate or not. But without independents or with closed primaries, it does change the incentives for how candidates run and how they govern. And if we want to incentivize politicians to be more accountable to most people, to the broad electorate, then allowing open primaries is the clear path to that, because it lets everybody vote in primaries, and then it incentivizes candidates to appeal to the masses, not just to their small, fervent party base on either poll.
Yeah.
So, and I will say also, if you haven't yet signed, please do. We do a drop-in location in Oklahoma City, but there are drop-in locations around the state. And there's also canvassers out everywhere. So I talked to somebody this morning who got approached like a 7-Eleven, and it was Lena, our intern, who's running the board. She's had already signed because she's a good intern, but it's good to know that the canvassers are out there. But also, if you're an independent voter and you want to help me, who is also an independent voter, do some outreach to the rest of these 487,000 independent voters, send us an email. You can send it to podcast@letsfixthis.org. But we're going to be spinning up kind of an independent outreach project, because I think there's a whole conversation that needs to be had, and we want to help have that. So you'll be seeing something about that very soon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is you've got the easiest charting list in the world now, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you know where the doors are. You just have to go to them.
Yeah. Well, and it's, independents are often ignored or overlooked by the parties.
Right.
And that's, this change from the Democrats is not going to change that. They're going to have to double down on reaching Democrats, because that's the only ones that can vote in their primaries. And that means that it's up to the rest of us to make sure that this, huge chunk of 20 or 22% of the electorate doesn't get forgotten about for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Keith, you mentioned being registered to vote in Texas.
Yes.
And you told me right before we started recording that you've now formally established your domicile in the Lone Star State.
Yep.
How does that feel?
Feels pretty good. I mean, I'm going to feel good wherever I go.
Yeah.
But, this is the next chapter, which is fun. And where I am in Texas, and Fort Worth is a really affirmative place. I mean, it's just a really good place. It's big, but it doesn't seem big.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nice. I mean, you got 2 million people in Tarrant County, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
And the politics are generally positive. There are all the crazy stuff of Texas state politics shows up. But that part of Texas in particular, it just seems to be this almost infectious optimism about what you might be able to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's an influence of, TCU owns Fort Worth the way OU owns the state of Oklahoma. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And considering they're both about the same size, it's, I think part of it has to do with the impact of that institution on the environment, but also this is just a very Texan thing, right? Oh, I lost $500 million. That's okay. I'll just go make it again, right?
Right.
And you stand up and you lean in and you go. And, I think, but I also think Texas is changing, and today's not the day to talk about that. What I will tell you, though, is just the act of trying to get registered in Texas is fascinating.
Registered to vote?
Yeah, it's probably easier to get a loan. Okay? And, the nice thing is with Motor Voter, you get your driver's license, they'll register your vote right then and there. But in order to get a driver's license, first of all, I had to get my car tagged.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get my car tagged, I have to have it inspected and demonstrate I had car insurance. I had to turn in the old registration, transfer the registration. I had to show that I had title to the vehicle. These things.
And
And
Texas
had to show
doesn't
that
have.
I had a Texas, and I had to show that I had Texas residency, which means a mortgage or a lease, right?
Okay.
Okay, so that's just to tag the car. Now I can go get a driver's license, and I need to show proof of personhood of birth, which is either my birth certificate or my passport. Now, I always carry my passport because you never know when you might need to blow the country. Okay,
Sure.
so it's always a good idea to have that thing with you, along with my passport, my Amex are always on me. Okay?
Sure,
So
yeah.
I'm good
Change
for
underwear, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well, they sell that in the airport.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
but so that's just a starting point. Okay, so lease or mortgage, proof that I've insured my vehicle, proof that I've registered my vehicle, right? My old driver's license. It's like 6 or 8 things.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you've been living in one place for 27 years, it takes a little while to kind of figure out where all this stuff is in the house and cobble it together.
Right.
Or, if you have to put it together for the first time, it's time and expense. It actually is time and expense just to register to vote. And I've always been struck by the fact that a narrative was given to the public of widespread voter fraud that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the folks at MIT have done a really good job of documenting this over the years. In something like 10 billion individual ballot casting events that they've studied, there has been fewer than 10 instances of voter impersonation, right? So almost none. I mean, the odds of finding a diamond in the sand on the beach are higher
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But, so for you, it's just a wonderful grand adventure in exploring the bureaucracy of the state of Texas. Once you get to the driver's license bureau, I'm in and out in 5 minutes, right?
Right.
Yeah. But, that's, my work has taken me there. My journey has taken me there. And it's a different kind of politics down there.
Yeah.
And a very different kind of Democratic Party because it has 3 different major ethnic components to it. It has mainly either liberal or older Anglo-whites, Hispanics, and African Americans. And the Hispanic electorate is potentially the largest electorate in the primary statewide. A majority of Texans under the age of 30 are Hispanic. Only about 32% are Anglo-white. Okay, that's a state that is going to look very different in 20 years from how it looks now.
Yeah.
In terms of ethnic makeup, and in terms of what the electorate looks like. It's going to be very different. And it's got real partisan consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Texas is fascinating, and I'm not just saying that because I'm biased as somebody who grew up there, but
Yeah.
as we were talking about earlier, like if you take a picture of the state of Texas, like the outline of the state, really anywhere in the world, and you talk to people, there's a decent chance they're going to know what that state is. That is not the case for probably any other state in America.
Yeah.
But Texas, because of its unique history and its unique personality, kind of stands apart.
Yeah.
And I think that your example there of the demographics of the Democratic Party is a good example that it is really a big tent party there that has to be a multiracial coalition in ways that we don't have to in Oklahoma. We try to be, and I think every party is trying to build the best coalition they can, but looking at something like that, plus Texas is just an enormous state with tons of people, and it is really, I think there's an argument to be made that it's multiple states kind of contained in one set of borders,
Yeah.
much like, the United States is arguably. There was a report out the other day, I listened to a podcast characterizing America as not one country, but 11 different countries that kind of have to live together.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm back rereading all that stuff right now because the next book I'm working on is it's about Southern nationalism and its impact on American national politics. And the 2 big engines driving Southern politics are the states of Texas and Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
because they have been at the forefront of the South's national role in politics going back really to the 1950s. It's those 2 states that are the driver, more so than any. Florida does a really good job of screwing up elections, okay? I say that having worked in Florida and lived in Florida, but Texas and Georgia are the big drivers, institutionally and electorally. They're the places that tend to matter in the South the most. And the South itself matters. You take the South out of the equation, Republicans don't win Congress or the presidency for the last 40 years. Yeah.
I mean, even for those of us who are fans of The West Wing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason that John Hoynes was vice president is because he could deliver Texas. Like that was part of the deal. Is
Which is the most fictional thing in in that whole show. Okay, and there's plenty of stuff in there. It's like, yeah, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
But, Aaron Sorkin gives us the walk and talk, so
right.
we enjoy it, right?
But that's what Texans want to believe, right?
Well, let's put it into context. I mean, Texas is physically bigger than France. Okay, let's start with that. It has 40 million people in it. It's the fastest growing state in the union. It's going to be the largest state in 30 years. There will be more Texans than Californians, more than likely. It's younger than much of the country. I think the average age in Texas is 6 years younger than in California, something like that. And it's always had this verbose quality. And, it's funny you said you show people Texas, they know it. There's this whole Texas-shaped stuff industry.
Yeah.
They sell Texas-shaped hot tubs.
Yeah.
You can get anything shaped like Texas.
Yeah.
Ash
Every La Quinta's got a Texas-shaped waffle maker.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and so, it's fascinating. So there is this Texas nationalism. Fehrenbach, T.R. Fehrenbach, the historian, wrote the book Lone Star back in the 60s and then did an updated edition at the end of the century, the end of the millennium. And he said that Texas is the American Israel, that the Anglo-Saxon vision of the possibilities of the American continent are more evident in Texas than anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas was a southern state, but it also had an active frontier. Mm-hmm. And the American West evolves from the American South. Mm-hmm. And that's an active frontier for Texas for 30 years after the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And it gives Texas a distinct and separate experience. Mm-hmm. And Texas, you can probably divide Texas into at least 6 major regions, and each of which has a huge population and a distinctive and separate political legacy.
Mm-hmm. And the tacos are not equally good everywhere.
No, not at all. And it's sort of funny, right when you get there, right about where the Chisholm Trail runs through Texas up to Oklahoma, you hit the biggest dilemma you could ever have when you hit a small courthouse town. Are you going to go to the taco joint or the barbecue joint?
Right, yeah.
Right? And, and I'll tell you, the best taco place I've found so far was in Marfa. I'm in Presidio County, way out there in West Texas.
Nothing else out there.
And we rolled into town to photograph the courthouse there, my buddy Jim and I. And when we are always looking for good Mexican joints in particular, because we know the best barbecues in Fort Worth.
Sure.
We got that covered. And we asked a woman at the courthouse where we could get lunch, and she said, well, it's not the season here. Marfa has a season, because Californians think that that's where they go to slum and have an authentic Texas experience, right?
Right.
But she said, but the best joint in town, irrespective, and the woman's name who runs, I think it's Alicia. She said, you'll know it because it's around behind the Dollar General. And I was like, she said, it's in a shack behind the Dollar General. I said, okay, I'm sold.
Right, yeah.
And it is, there's a dish they serve in Fort Worth called the Roosevelt or the FDR, which was FDR's favorite plate when you come to Texas. And so it's a tamale, an enchilada, and a taco, and some beans and rice. It's the best one I've ever had. When I went there, it was just fantastic. Just hot enough to make your tongue stand up. Good, rich, fresh ingredients, and the price was unbelievable. Unbelievably affordable.
Sure,
Yeah.
That's funny. I was in Texas a few weeks ago for a democracy reform convening in Austin. It was, I went to high school down there. It was great to kind of be back. I hung out with some friends from high school that I hadn't seen in 20 years. And I, just driving down there, and I grew up in Texas. It is not the same as it was growing up, but, and for several years, I was like real kind of angry about it. I was like really disappointed in the state. But it's, I don't know if it's an unhealthy relationship or time has healed some old wounds, but, the moment I cross the border and see the first Lone Star flag, there's like something inside of me that stirs. So I flip my radio over to, some George Strait and Willie Nelson and Pat Green and like ZZ Top, and just like listening to all these like Texas artists, get into Stevie Ray Vaughan. And as I'm driving down I-35 and stopping at, the Czech stop and at Buc-ee's and all these places, and like contemplating what it means to be a Texan
Yeah.
in the modern age, where it does not have the same connotation that it did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And trying to like reconcile my own love of Oklahoma now that I didn't anticipate having 20 years ago, with this perpetual affinity, and like there's an element of me that will always be Texan, right? That like that will never, you can take the boy out of Texas, but you can't take Texas out of the boy, kind of thing. And and thinking about what the state means to so many other people, 40 million people who live there right now.
Yeah.
But all of us who are, Texas expats around the country, if you meet a Texan in France, you'll know, because he's going to tell you about it. And it is not always the case in every state. So I think that's fascinating. I'm really excited that you're down there, because it lets me see the state through someone else's eyes in a new way, and I like that.
Yeah, it's funny though, if you look, you said, how do you know somebody's from Texas? They tell you, right? And they may not even have to open their mouth to do that, but they'll find a way to let you know. It's funny because that initial generation of people who settle Anglo-Texas are all a bunch of frontier expats that are coming from Tennessee and Kentucky, or they are displaced planters who have come from the Carolinas and Georgia, and they've worn out some of the land. These people all come streaming in the 1830s.
That's exactly what my Ancestry.com tells me my ancestors did.
Yeah, and these particular people are, and I come from these people also. My family came into Kentucky in 1774, and they decided, yeah, this is good enough. That Ohio River looks wide. We're not crossing that thing. But Texas has that same frontier origin. It has it later, and it has the same conflicts that Kentucky and Tennessee had. And Oklahoma contains the residual of that conflict, which is all of these dependent nations that are pushed out, and they all end up in Oklahoma, right? But Texas has strong cultural tie to Texas because Texas helped settle Anglo-Oklahoma along with Arkansas and a variety of other places. But it's something we ought to explore sometime. Texas and Oklahoma together. It's kind of like Germany and Austria.
Yeah.
It is. It's similar but not the same. One's landlocked, the other one isn't. One is massive, the other one isn't.
Yeah.
Of course, there are no mountains in Oklahoma, really, at the end of the day. I know the Arbuckles are mountains, so please don't put that in the comments. But
mountains with quotation marks.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think they meet the technical definition barely, which is, I think, 1,000 feet of height.
Right.
Yeah. But, and, of course, you've got the mesas out west, and Black Mesa is gorgeous.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
But Oklahoma has got to decide how its relationship with Texas operates.
Yeah.
And what it is that there are things that make this place distinct that still hold up. But the thing is, Texas is down there so big, so dynamic, so large, so loud. It's hard to break through all that noise.
Yeah.
And we are increasingly ever so economically dependent on it.
Yeah.
And we've got poor economic, technological, and physical infrastructure for interacting with Texas in Oklahoma. But it's taking form. I mean, one of the biggest banks in this state, Bank First, owns two of the biggest banks in the Metroplex. And I've always contended that Oklahoma has to decide if it's going to be Texas's Switzerland or Texas's Mississippi. And it's going to be those efforts in the financial, energy, and information sector. They're going to help Oklahoma become the former rather than the latter.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I look forward. I'm sure in 2026, Texas will be front and center on political news in many ways, and so I'm sure it'll come back up in our conversations.
Absolutely.
And I'll end on one little story just to bring us full circle. I mentioned Friday night in Miami, I was wearing a Lyle Lovett t-shirt, and on the back, it's some lyrics from one of my favorite songs. That's right, you're not from Texas, but Texas wants you anyway. And a woman at this art gallery we were at came up and said, "Hey, I saw your shirt. Are you from Texas?" And I said, "I am." She's like, "I'm from Houston." And so we started talking, and you can like feel the conversation being like, do we know any of the same people? Out of these 40 million,
Yes.
and we're both in Miami, what are the chances we know? And we didn't have any direct connections, but we knew some like similar landmarks and places. And I was like, that's right. It really is a big community. What are the odds? And even at our conference, right? There was you and me and David from Ranked Choice Voting for Texas, and standing around talking. And it's like, what are the odds that these three guys ended up in Miami, Florida, having this conversation? And yes, at least one of us was wearing cowboy boots at the time.
And that was me, actually. But it's it's a fascinating thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Really is.
But, Keith, thanks for being back again this week.
Oh, as always, Andy. And I'm back. I tell people I'm bi-coastal, right? I live on both sides of the Red River, effectively.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll be back. We'll probably do one more episode this year before we break for the holidays, but I hope you'll come back in the new year, and maybe we'll find a way to do a year-end wrap-up, because 2025 has been a doozy.
Yeah, and we started this with a theme in exploration of what a constructive democracy, a constructive liberalism, a constructive conservatism looks like, and we've been able to allow some breath into that.
Yeah.
And I think as we look at events that are taking place at the end of this year, it looks like constructive conservatism is trying to reassert itself. Because, quick note, yesterday the Indiana legislature rejected the Trump gerrymandering proposal for Indiana, and a majority of Republicans in the state Senate rejected it.
Which is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
I saw a tweet from the Heritage Foundation that said, if Indiana rejects this, Trump is going to end all federal funding to Indiana, and said no roads being fixed, no help. It was really heavy-handed, and I was like, this is like Gestapo kind of craziness.
And they're acting like this is something new.
Right.
This has been going on throughout both terms of this disrupted regime.
Yeah.
And it's exactly why you have everything else in place.
Yeah.
Right? The fun thing with Indiana, though, is Indiana has a history of really strong party government, to the extent that in the city of Indianapolis, after mayoral elections in the late 19th century, if the Democrats won the mayoralty, everybody in the fire department was fired, and the Democratic fire department came in their gray uniforms. Everybody in the police department was fired, and the Democratic police department came in their gray uniforms. And then the Republicans would win the next mayoral election, and the Republican fire department came in with their blue uniforms, and the Republican police department came in with their blue uniforms.
That's crazy.
And a state employee was obliged to give 3% of their salary to the state party. It was a pure spoils system well into the 20th century. So if even Indiana is not willing to respond to this,
right,
because Indiana has a deep history of organized, machined, strong party politics, that is, it's interesting. But, these lawmakers had to know the consequences, and they took action.
Yeah.
The other thing about a Donald Trump threat is he gets distracted by something, and the threat never really comes through, right? We're too busy. We're too busy attempting to go to war with Venezuela right now, near as I can tell.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe that's a legitimate thing to know. I don't know. I'm not following the story.
Right.
I'm hoping the lawmakers are, because they get paid to do that.
Right.
Yeah, but.
Well, it sounds like we'll have some stuff to talk about in the new year.
Yeah, indeed. We may actually cut off the entire end of this and just tack it on the beginning of the next one and call it done.
Yeah. Well, Keith, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Andy.
Listeners, thank you for being here as well. As always, a couple of reminders. One, we're going to have our final Democracy Drinks happy hour of the year next Friday, December 19th, at Skydance Brewing, per usual. Looks like the weather's going to hold out, so it should be a really good time. I hope you can join us, and I hope you bring a friend. It's just a fun time to be together. There's no formal programming. It's a come meet friends, hug someone, shake a hand, but have a chance to hang out. And I think we all need a little bit more of that. Two, if you're an independent, sorry, you are for now blocked out of voting in primaries for the next couple of years. But as I said earlier, we need you to be even more involved. I think this is not a free pass. This should light a fire underneath each and every one of us. So please reach out. We're going to have some real opportunities for that in the new year. And three, decisions are made by those who show up. Regardless of party affiliation, there are ways to show up. We have a massive need for change in Oklahoma, and I think 2026 is going to be the year we start seeing it happen. So I look forward to working with you, and we'll be back probably next week. Have a great week.